So I want to start by talking about American politics, which you have a particular fascination with, don't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love politics anyway, in general, and US politics is always very, very exciting and different, and it's particularly so at the moment. So having spent a lot of time in the United States, I've followed it for a long time and just enjoy it, really.
And you have a house in Hawaii, and you're the director of a company called Palo Alto that's in California. So you've got skin in the game, in a sense.
Plenty of connections,
So, who do you think will win the US election?
Yeah, look, I think it's tricky. I mean, it's blindingly obvious to say that Kamala Harris has changed the narrative in terms of momentum, has gone back a bit more towards the Democrats, and I don't think that was the case prior to that. Having said that, you know, I'm not so sure. I think Trump can actually win it. And I think there's sort of two reasons. One, I think America's very divided, but the economy will still be a big issue, and Donald Trump polls well on that. Secondly, it's not like New Zealand where every vote counts, far from it. It's only really those swing states of Pennsylvania, you know, Wisconsin, Georgia, those kind of places. And then thirdly, I think, putting it sort of bluntly, Donald Trump isn't everyone's cup of tea, that's for sure. But some people might vote for him but not want to tell a pollster they're voting for him. So I think you could see the 2016 effect where he's doing better than actually what you see in the polls.
That's right. That's what we saw with Hillary Clinton, wasn't it? Everybody thought she was going to win, but actually Trump was ahead. Yeah, I find that really interesting. So when it was Trump versus Biden, do you think Trump would definitely have won in that scenario?
Yeah, I was like at 98%.
98%. Yeah. Now that it's Trump versus Harris, what kind of percentage
do
you put it at now?
I still got him to get over the line, actually, although, you know, I could easily be wrong, but I think it's 55-45 he wins it. I mean, it's not straightforward because it is so hard. Like, all of those swing states seem to be in the margin of error. We've still got quite a lot of days to go. I mean, Hillary Clinton ran a really bad ground game. She never went to those swing states at the very end. Kamala Harris won't make that mistake again. Her running mate comes from one of those swing states. So it's not as simple, but nevertheless, anyway, I think it'll be too close to call for quite a while. But if Donald Trump can wrestle the debate back onto the economy, I think he wins. I think if it's on all these other issues, he potentially loses. But I've still got him ahead in my brain.
You still think that he's going to win?
Yeah.
Who do you think should win?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question because I think on both sides, I mean, I'm centre-right, unashamedly centre-right, have always voted, you know, centre-right my entire life. You'd have to say that some of the policies that you see from the Republican Party under Donald Trump are a long, long way from what I believe in. So, for instance, I'm economically very conservative, balance the budget, lower taxes, all of those things, market-based solutions, but I'm socially very liberal. They are very conservative. I mean, you know, their positions on abortion and on a huge range of other issues. So America is very different. I mean, we're a secular society in New Zealand. We believe that church should be out of the governing of a country. If they don't say God bless America, and if they didn't believe in God, they probably couldn't even get elected. It's just a very different system.
So in terms of who should win, do you think that Trump would be better for America, better for the world, better for New Zealand? Or do you think that Harris would be?
I think he's better for the economy because
does
I think
that make him the better choice?
Well,
completely.
Looking at it from one perspective, which I think he's better from an economic point of view. But the only thing I'd say is that, you know, I spent a lot of time with Barack Obama, obviously, to try and get TPP across the line, and we did. And the very first thing that Donald Trump did was rip up the free trade agreement between New Zealand and basically America. So from that perspective, you know, I don't know how great, you know, necessarily that is. I also think that New Zealand is a little country. We benefit when we hold hands with all the countries around the world. So we do well out of things like the United Nations or any sort of grouping, APEC, East Asian Summit. Donald Trump is driving very much an America first, an America more isolationist kind of view, actually. It's quite different, actually. It's a very different foreign policy than we've ever seen. So that probably doesn't help New Zealand as much. But on balance, I think he's probably better for the economy.
Some experts and analysts are saying that, you know, Trump's economic plans are radical, and they are radically different from last time he was president. He wants to slap tariffs on anything and everything coming into the country, and he's talking about 20% tariffs for China, 60% for some countries that he doesn't like the look of, 100%. What do you make of those policies?
Yeah, well, you know, the crazy thing with that is that, and actually Kamala Harris pointed that out in the first debate when she tried to make the point, actually China doesn't pay those tariffs. Middle income consumers or consumers in America pay it. Because when a tariff goes on a good that you bring into a country, you, the consumer, pay that. So actually, ironically, it's the consumers that pay. And I think The Economist wrote an article a while ago saying that if all of those tariffs were put on, then that would have the single biggest impact of reducing the standard of living for Americans, because they're used to going to Walmart and Costco and buying, relatively speaking, cheaper Chinese goods and goods from all around the world that are cheaper. So I don't obviously agree with this tariff policy, but
it's been put at $2,600 US a year for the average household spend on goods, which is over 4,000 New Zealand dollars. So that's what those tariffs may do for the average American. So, but you still think he's better economically for America?
Well, he certainly wants lower taxes. He probably wants more market-based solutions. He's probably got a freer energy policy. There's a whole lot of different things. I mean,
so who's that better for, though?
Well, I still think overall, actually, if you have less bureaucracy in your governing of an economy, as a general rule, it will perform better. So if you go back and look at the 2016 to 20 period when Donald Trump was president, all you really focused on was some of the outrageous things he said or did, and they were definitely outrageous, and they were there. You know, I get all that. But actually, Chris Liddell spent a lot of time as a New Zealander involved in his administration, actually cutting huge amounts of bureaucracy and red tape out of the system. And that did help. And it's a bit like in New Zealand. I mean, I think if the government really can get on top of the red tape and the bureaucracy, it can make the boat go faster. And so that's where I think Donald Trump's good for the economy.
Well, he's even talked about bringing in Elon Musk to cut through all the bureaucracy that he thinks is excessive, and that's part of his plan. So who do you think's better for the economy, Trump or Harris?
I think Trump.
Trump's better. Trump's better for Wall Street?
It's on balance. I mean, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, if you look at some of the statements that Kamala Harris had made before she was running as president, then she's quite left-wing in her views, and she was really talking about some pretty high taxes and pretty high restrictions. Now, I don't know whether that still happens. I mean, frankly, both of them are talking about having quite a big impact on Silicon Valley. I mean, both the left and the right in the US are talking about potentially everything from breaking up Google and Facebook, Meta, right through to all sorts of, taxes on billionaires. So we'll see. I mean, it's going to be interesting.
It is going to be fascinating.
Yeah.
I think when I last spoke to you back in August, you said that Harris holds some radical far left economic views. What were you referring to then?
Well, if you go back and look at a lot of the things that she'd said in the past, she isn't a great supporter of the market-based sort of solution. She is a supporter of very significant increases in taxes in the United States. Now, she's changing because she's now the presidential candidate, and she's trying to say, well, for low to middle income Americans, I'll make sure those taxes aren't high. But I think in terms of the entrepreneurial capitalist culture that's driven the United States innovation and creativity, I think she's negative for that, and I think she would have a lot greater reach into rules and regulations and red tape basically in America. So, well, it all depends on what she actually does, not what she says.
So, who do you think will be better for America's economy and the global economy, Trump or Harris?
Well, I do think on balance he's better for the US economy because he's likely to embrace a bit more market, he's likely to have less red tape, and he's certainly going to have lower taxes. So that bit's good. I think in terms of when he puts tariffs and things on, that could even affect New Zealand. I mean, he might decide to have tariffs on everywhere. I mean, he's talking about a very broad-based tariff approach where he's going to recycle that money into the US economy. I mean, I think his general narrative, and the reason why he's got an interesting voting base voting for him, is he's trying to say to Americans, we've been too nice. We've been the people out there paying for everything, we've been accommodating everyone, and everyone's taken advantage of us. And it's going to be America first, and I'm unashamedly going to do that. So by definition, if they are first, does that mean we're a little bit further back? That bit's negative, but I think Kamala Harris on the economy, just generally, if she follows her instincts, doesn't follow necessarily what she's saying on the campaign trail, then she's she's quite left-wing, and ultimately left-wing economics, in my opinion, has proven to be spectacularly unsuccessful.
And so do you still think she has those radical left-wing?
No, she absolutely does. Yeah,
she does?
I mean, look, she would have aligned herself with Bernie Sanders. I mean, she's been quite left-wing. I mean, much more. I mean, Joe Biden, for instance, has been in politics now for over 50 years. Joe Biden would describe himself as a centrist, and he's obviously a Democrat, so he's on the left of politics, but he would describe himself as a centrist. She is well left of Joe Biden.
So what I'm hearing is that, Sir John Key, you not only think Trump has the edge at this point, that he will win over Harris, but you actually think he would be better for America?
Well, I think he's better for the economy. I think the question is, okay, then if America goes to a more isolationist, less inclusive sort of perspective, what does that mean for global geopolitics, And I think there's only so far he can take that, because one of the reasons that the Americans have played the role they have is they are, at the moment, the only global superpower. If they abdicate leadership responsibility, say for instance in a region like Asia Pacific, then someone else is going to fill that vacuum and void, and some countries are going to feel very vulnerable. I mean, what does it mean? Like, he's already said, for instance, if you don't pay your bills in NATO, I won't defend you, and by the way, if Russia wants to attack you, good on them. I mean, that's very provocative stuff to say.
That's his sort of, strongman style of politics, isn't it? That, I will do and say what I want, and if you don't fall into line, then you're on your own.
And I take a lot of it with a grain of salt. Like, I mean, I kind of understand it, but they're in the campaign phase, and I think he does mean it, that you've got to pay your bill when it comes to NATO. And actually, he's probably got a fair enough point that some of these very wealthy countries can afford to pay. But would he really want the whole world order to start breaking down? I think the answer to that's no.
What will happen though when he starts throwing these tariffs onto everything? An expert on this said all of this stuff, sanctions, threats of tariffs, it is not the right way to go. That is a way of guaranteeing World War III.
Yeah, look, the basic argument around trade is that trade, and we always used to argue this as New Zealand, a little country that made our way in the world selling things to other markets by having high quality free trade agreements. We would say, look, countries that trade together have something in common. And even if they disagree on lots of things, if they can agree on trade, then they're less likely ultimately to go to war or to have serious conflict. Not that we were going to war with anyone, but the argument was it's a glue that brings people together in a world where you otherwise might not. So in world trade, actually, I know globalization's out of favour, and supply chains with COVID and all that sort of stuff, but think about New Zealand. We win out of trade, not because we're taking advantage of someone, but because we have a competitive advantage to some things. And by the way, we just don't have enough consumers for what we produce to actually sell it here. So, big tariffs on us isn't good either, and free trade deals are good for us. So let's hope that's what happens. But in the end, if he really puts big tariffs on in the United States and he keeps them on, then middle-income consumers are going to have a reduction in their standard of living. Everything they go and buy from Walmart, Costco, whatever, is going up. And I think eventually, if that's the case, they themselves will start saying, we don't like this. So Donald Trump is many things, but moving to whatever the latest sort of view is one thing he's probably quite good at adapting. Most politicians are. So I'm not sure how much of this is threat and how much of this is real.
You don't know if it's bluster, a negotiating position, complete baloney. You really don't know what he's talking about. And that leads to a question about character. Do you sometimes think, what if it wasn't Barack Obama who was the US president while you were leading New Zealand? What if it was Trump? Do you watch the news? Do you look at CNN? Do you think about that?
No, I mean, I obviously look at all of that sort of stuff. I mean, put it this way, as I always used to say, you don't pick the world leaders that are on the stage at the time that you're leading your country. You do your very best to maintain, develop relations, have the best relations. Some are better and some are worse. Some you have a better relationship, some are others. I mean, Barack Obama, him and I actually didn't agree on economic policy quite a lot. We'd have discussions about various things. I mean, I'm a very market-based, market-trusting sort of person. That's the nature of my background. he didn't trust the market and didn't particularly like that side of things. Didn't mean that we couldn't have a great relationship. So,
but you could understand, like when he said something, you believed him, right?
Yeah,
but with Trump, it's the biggest, it's the greatest, it's the numbers like you've never seen, crowds like you've never seen, and none of it actually adds up when you look at it often. So how do you deal with that as a president?
But the weird thing is, for all of that, he's been selected, and I can't fully explain that, because I think, look, the blunt reality is if Donald Trump was leading the National Party in New Zealand, I don't think he'd be the leader, and I don't think New Zealanders would elect him. That's reality. But, he, as I always say, you've got a very divided America at the moment, and he is a symptom of middle America in particular, feeling left behind and feeling unfairly treated. And you've got a very divided country. I mean, divided on race issues, divided on ethnic concerns, divided on immigration issues, divided on inequality issues, divided on environmental issues. I mean, I don't think you've ever seen a point where America is so divided. And so you've got these leaders that are sort of, they themselves are polarising to a certain degree, and they're really tapping in to that sort of discontent. And weirdly, if you think about it, Donald Trump is turning into the champion of blue-collar voters. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that's not their normal base.
But also, like we just talked about, if he goes through with these big tariffs, those same voters are going to be spending
more,
$2,500 more per year on goods.
Yeah.
So he says that he's going to be better, but actually he may very well not be for those very people.
But then his argument would be that I'm going to create an economy which is going to create more jobs and going to be more
but that's
fluid.
That's exactly what the Democrats are saying, that they're going to create more jobs, that they'll lift the standard of living, that they'll lift wages.
Yeah, I think to be fair to Donald Trump, I think the evidence shows that when he was president, he did cut a lot of bureaucracy, he did support a lot of private sector, there was quite a lot of job growth. So the problem with all of these things is they're always in isolation, and it's like looking at numbers in New Zealand when COVID took place, or say when the GFC was there or something. You can't take things out in isolation. So my main point would really be, look, I'm a core believer in centre-right politics. So I believe that if you have individuals and companies being able to have an appropriately managed but nevertheless greater presence with less bureaucracy, less regulation, less red tape, less taxes, I think people do invest, take risks and create jobs. So that'll be his argument about why it'll be better for those workers. And his argument is, well, the countries I'm targeting aren't playing fair, and they're not treating you fairly, and the reason you're losing your job is because they're doing things that we don't agree with. So I kind of understand it. It's just the question is, what is campaign rhetoric and what is reality?
But you agree with all that stuff that you were just talking about? You agree with Trump on that stuff?
Well, not all of it. I mean, I don't agree with the massive tariffs, and I don't think he'll follow through with all of that, and I certainly don't agree with his view on trade. But I can, but certain elements of it, it's very difficult because you've got a macro position, the economy, versus individual micro policies. I don't agree with all of them, but I agree with some of them.
What about, do you think that Trump won the 2020 election?
No.
Well, he does.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. But and look, it strikes me, and I've struggled to understand the logic of it. I think his argument, in so much he's got one, is he's trying to say there was illegal voting fraud, and there isn't anyone of any credibility that's actually come out and said there's enough of that. There'll always be some people who vote twice or whatever. I mean, it happens in every election, it happens in New Zealand, but the number, as I understand it, is infinitesimally low. Like, it's tiny. And actually the authorities find out about it. They do a reconciliation.
Yes,
but not to the level that he's argued.
And then he's telling his voter base that, and then they are storming the Capitol on January 6th, which is deeply problematic, is it not, for the leader of America?
It's probably just the fact that he can say the kind of, I didn't lose, and it's just a narrative that he's created, and but Americans, nevertheless, whether we agree with it or not, have selected him, at least the Republican primary candidates have, or voters have, and we'll see whether he actually ultimately wins an election on the back of it.